the August 23rd, 2017 Board of Trustees meeting. Moving on to our next item is a basic report out from closed session. No action was taken at that time. And at this time is public comment. Anyone in the audience would like to come up to the podium and discuss or present any item pertaining to anything not on the agenda?
Malcolm, I think you have to turn the mic on. You hold down the mute button until it turns green.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Hi, Board. Superintendent, Ms. Emery. I just have 2 quick points. One is our 2 new principals. They look really, really good. The first 2 days of school have felt like a different school, and I feel very hopeful about the impact they're going to have. Second point is the planters. Since we're using the courtyard more intensively, it makes the risk go up, and I'd be curious to hear what the plan is for them. And I have just a couple odd thoughts about them. One is the gravel that's in them. I think it would be best if we just got rid of the gravel. They're just, as long as that gravel is there, it's going to be everywhere. The kids don't seem to throw it. That doesn't seem to be the main issue, but it's just messy. It doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. And I think it'd be a good idea just to get rid of it. And in the meantime, if there's not going to be something to make those planters, not a falling hazard, maybe possibly they could just temporarily be filled with something to prevent an accident. I think we were very lucky last year not to have something happen with those planters since the kids are all over them. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is reports, and starting off with the ETA report. Anyone from the ETA here to report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the CSEA representative. None here. And then the student representative report.
School started yesterday. It was our first day. We have a new AP class. We have 2 volunteers within that class, 1 member from Uber and 1 member from Google, I believe. So it's exciting. I don't think there's anything new yet, but yeah.
Which AP class is new?
Huh?
What's the new AP class?
Computer science.
And just for clarity, starting a new school year, can you state your name and your grade level for us?
Oh, I'm Kimberly Solis, and I'm a senior now.
Thank you.
All right, anything else, Dad? All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I have a number of things to report out on, and I will report out on one to help, I hope, with the questions, very good questions Mr. Wall presented regarding the planners. And I'm not sure, there's probably a better, no offense, Mr. Wall, I don't know the better word for them. They're not quite planters. They're part of the water filtration system that the city required us to put in place. So unfortunately, the rocks and the gravel are part of a design that were per regulations that we had to agree to. So I just wanted you to know that. However, that being said, we have a company coming Tuesday morning to look at them. They received some pictures of pictures from me of the areas. And the idea that I've asked them to help with is to design a steel, either a grate over them or something around, a barrier around them. So I'm going to see how quickly we can move on that, and I hope that helps in terms of your very good questions. I have an update. I'll throw this one in regarding the facility and construction for the board. I had endeavored earlier in the summer to try to bring together some of the parties, such as the construction company, the architects, and some of the inspectors of records. My belief was that the board, that I had direction to do that, so the board had more information regarding the question of whether or not and how to do different types of audits of the facility. We were able to reach Mr. John Millen, who was one of the two inspectors of record, who expressed that he would not be available and didn't really have much interest in coming. And so that did not work. We're trying to make contact with the other inspector of record, and so we'll see if we can pull that off this week. And Mr. Baker has been out of the country and is returning tomorrow. And although, again, Swinnerton no longer officially works for us, we are going to be asking Mr. Baker about helping us connect with the other inspector of record, and also regarding the request that came out of the city schools meeting that Swinnerton should be paying for some type of inspector to walk through the facility based on the miscommunication around the warranty issue. So I will endeavor to reach Mr. Baker tomorrow when he gets back into the country, and so we can follow up on those items. And right now, my goal is to try to have that meeting with the architect and the construction company, and if we can get the other inspector of record and maybe one of our auditors in the second meeting of September. On another note, I wanted to share something with the board. I recognize that in June, and we all were there, there was a very important meeting, and we had a number of teachers come and speak to the board and to me, and there were a number of issues that were brought up that were very important. And I also recognize and I'm aware of the fact that I think some teachers feel like because those conversations weren't thoroughly, maybe to the extent of the conversation or verbatim in our minutes, that there was no public record or thorough public record of those. And so I wanted to let the board know, and I hope the board is in no way offended, because I know the board made a decision about the minutes in that meeting, that I would like, as part of my update tonight, to let the board know that I have the minutes transcribed by a court reporter. They didn't know the names of the speakers, so I will add the names of the speakers that they transcribed from the video directly. And as part of my update tonight, unless the board is opposed, I would just like to add and offer an actual verbatim of the conversation as part of my superintendent's update that would be attached to our next meeting when the minutes are attached as well. So I just wanted to offer that, and if there's no objection from the board, then I'll proceed to keep that as part of my update tonight. A couple other things. One, I just wanted to also say how happy I am about the opening of school, and thank you to all of our staff and our teachers, because it wouldn't have happened without everybody working as a team. And I'm feeling very good about the team we have in place. And I met a lot of happy parents, and not 100%. We had some parents who maybe a few instances here where some of the applications were not approved based on the record of behavior or grades coming in outside of Emeryville, or other issues. And so everybody, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, there wasn't 100% happiness among everyone. And there were some lines, but overall the feedback I've received from teachers is that, and a high school student who walked up to me the other day, was that this was much better than last year, and people were very happy with how school opened. So I just want to say thank you to the staff, Mr. Wall and everybody, because I think, and our IT team, and Ms. Parham, and Ms. Magruder, and Erica Santana, because without everybody working together, it wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Numbers are still in flux. We do have higher numbers of parents who have registered online, but we did see last year a number of people registered to come here, and then some came and then left after 2 weeks. So they're not accurate numbers yet. So I'll be asking the principals, and I've started to ask them to let them know over the next 10 days, which is commonly what districts do. We start doing physical counts in the classrooms to get an idea of what the numbers are. I have a little bit of anecdotal information that even though we had a very small 8th grade bubble of 27 kids last year, that the 9th grade incoming has jumped to about 41 so far. So that's some positive potential news for us. And as soon as we know more numbers, I will get those to the board. And by the next board meeting, we certainly will present all the numbers that we have. And I just would share, I think I might have told the board that we opened school with a hot breakfast that was catered for the teachers, and I was happy that we got to do that, and I think it was a nice way to start. And really, again, thank you to the staff and the principals and everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rubio.
I would like to ask a question. May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So with registration, I got public communication that told parents that they would not be able to bring their children here or leave their children here if they didn't fill out the financial information.
We have sent many different messages that parents must register online and must complete all their forms
Yeah.
before they are able to begin school.
So do the parents have to fill out their financial information for free and reduced lunch in order to have their child come here?
We have asked them to do so before they begin school. Yes.
Are they, that they're required to? They can't.
Well, we
come-
can't legally, I don't think we
Okay.
can legally require them, as you may know. However, we do ask them to complete their forms beforehand, and the reason we do that is because, as you probably know, the board may know, those forms are tied directly to how we're funded, and to be quite honest, we chase down, and I'll use the phrase chase down, 30 to 35 families for 3 months last year who didn't do it, and where it wasn't clearly required before they started, we had to hire someone to come in, calling them. We asked the person to consider knocking on their doors, because without those forms filled out, it leaves us in a very precarious position. As the board may recall, by doing this and by doing it online and by asking parents and pushing parents to do this before the year starts, our free and reduced numbers have gone from 60% to 75% for the last 2 years. So there's a substantial financial impact. And so, yes, we do ask parents, do this before your child comes, if you want to find out the information and how to, and before you start school.
So my question was whether they are required to. And there was an email sent out that implied that they had to fill out the form and before their child will be allowed at school. And that seems counterintuitive to a sanctuary school or to trying to be inclusive and trying to understand why people might feel uncomfortable filling out a financial information to the school. And if those two things are tied together so people feel that, or told, they were told in an email, I received it, they were told that they had to or their child would not be allowed at school.
Okay.
And I think that that's counterintuitive to embracing students and understanding that they are not responsible for what their parents do,
Okay.
and that they should be allowed at school, even if their parents don't fill out financial information. This is a public school.
Okay, I appreciate the opinion, and I'll go ahead and take that into consideration. Thank you.
So I have a quick question. In regards to online registration as well as the online free and reduced lunch applications, are we offering the parents an opportunity to do anything by paper? Online, is that their
We
only
did last
choice?
year. We haven't yet. No parent. We had one parent out of the 700 families or so who said that they had a fear of putting anything online. So for that one parent, we did that, but we haven't received any of those requests.
So my concerns are for those that don't have access to technology. Do we have a way of them
Oh
being
yeah,
able to?
absolutely. And Ms. Dunn will be doing the follow-up piece. So if anyone, and last year she did that as well. She offered to have them come and sit down with her and fill it out by paper.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Was the system down during the registration process?
I don't recall the system being down, remember, not that I recall.
Because I heard parents saying that they were filling out paper forms on one of the evenings because the system was down.
We had, I don't recall the system being down, and I would encourage you, if you wouldn't mind, to certainly feel free to reach out to my office and to me, to, if something comes up, and because that way I can respond to you and find out. I don't know offhand.
You don't know if the registration system was down during enrollment?
My belief is that it was not.
Okay.
I have a quick question. When I believe months ago, Ms. Dunn was speaking about forms that were very useful to be filled out, but unfortunately, the completion rate for them was quite low. I don't remember the name of the forms. I believe one started with an F, the other one started with an H or something like that. It has to do with grant. This form allows us parents and our families to access the health services in some way. Hopefully you can shed, you know which forms I'm talking about, but I remember months ago we said that it would be a great idea to include that form as part of the registration packet. And so I'm wondering if that came to, we actually went ahead and moved forward with that, or we did not.
We went forward, not in that manner. We ended up doing a U.S. mailer to the families, and we did a full front page ad in the city activity guide that just came out last week, I think, so that there's the information about what's the services that are available and the phone number to call and register. The county clinic believed that it would not be legal for us, based on some of their regulations, for us to put those forms online as part of the registration process, so they kind of balked at the idea.
I can see how they shouldn't be required, but if we really wanted to increase the filling of those forms, we spoke about making those part of the packet. They don't have to be required fields in a form, right? But again, it's too late now, but I was hoping that they would be part of that. Thank you.
Yeah, we did try. We got a lot of pushback, unfortunately, from the county on it.
So I have an enrollment question. So you gave us the number for certain grades. Do you have a ballpark figure of the attendance for enrollment for high school and broken down and middle school and elementary school yet?
No, in part because it's just day 2 today, and the numbers aren't going to be accurate. They're going to keep fluctuating. We have parents. We heard today a few families, they didn't check the website and they weren't sure. They thought we were still out this week. They're still vacationing, so we don't have any accurate numbers to share.
Okay. Can we bring that back to the board for the next meeting?
Yeah,
Your
absolutely.
report?
Yeah.
Do you have kinder numbers?
I do not.
Are there 2 kinder classrooms?
There are 3 kindergarten, 3
There's
kindergarten
3
classes.
kinder classes.
And 1 transitional K,
Okay.
in terms of teachers.
Mr. Wong, can you take the position?
Please step up to the podium if you have a question.
No, he has a
No, he doesn't
says
have a- he has-
ballpark figure of the numbers to answer to a question.
Well, my only recommendation to the board is that, guys, we don't have accurate numbers yet. Now, Mr. Wall and any of us can. He's a classroom with students. but
I wasn't looking, I was looking for ideas. Was kinder small, was it large? It sounds like there's 3 teachers, and those rooms probably have children in them.
they have students in them, yes. And so we have parents coming in today and later this
They
week.
have
and so.
students in them.
I'm
But
sorry.
So the rooms have students in them, but nobody
Yes.
knows if it's a large group of students or a small group of students. Somebody knows.
It's up to the president if you're going to do this. So this was an update. It was meant to be an update, guys. And I really would appreciate the questions in advance if I can. I didn't intend. We don't have accurate numbers since day 2. So
I'm not looking, I'm just looking for a general idea as to how kinder is
Kin-
going.
Kinder sounds a little low to me right now.
Can
So
we get a
my
ballpark?
general impression is that our numbers are lower than they were last year so far. At Kinder. I think she's 19, I believe. Yeah. Ideally, we'd have 20 in every classroom if we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, that was a ballpark figure. Anything else, Dr. Rubio?
Nothing for me, thank you.
All right, now we'll move on to the board president's report. All I wanted to report on is that I had the chance and the opportunity to meet with some of the staff on the breakfast last Friday, and it was an enjoyable time. And I felt, at least, I mentioned at least, but it was starting the year off on a good note. I felt the positive energy and just people's bright outlook for the year. I think people are, the staff and are putting an honest effort out there, and they are going to be rewarded this year, I think. So I just wanted to let you know that it did start off well, and I appreciate the offer and the opportunity to swing by and say hi. Thank you. Okay, on to the next item is item consent calendar. Items 7.1 and 7.2, and forgive us for not having any of the other typicals, warrants, and hiring or employment, that Ms. Harrell's out for not the indefinite future, but for the next couple weeks. Yeah, unfortunately, she's been taken ill, but I hope she's on a speedy recovery. As for the remaining items, you have items 7.1 and 7.2 to discuss. Do I have any adjustment or pulling of those items?
I have a question on 7.1, a general comment on.
Would you like
Should
to
we
pull
pull it?
that? Yeah.
Pull that
Okay,
then.
let's go ahead and
Uh-huh.
pull item 7.1 and anything for 7.2. If not, do I have a motion to accept 7.2?
I'll move.
I will second it. Roll call, please.
Member Solis?
Yes.
Member Collins?
Yes.
Member Inch?
Yes.
Member Langner?
Yes.
Member Vargas?
Yes.
President Merriam?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. And on back to item 7.1.
My
Mr.
general,
Vargas?
thanks. My general thought here is that not just on these minutes, but on previous minutes as well, the future agenda items list is not growing, yet we have been talking about adding items to future agenda items, and we've agreed to add
Mhm.
future agenda items to the future agenda item section. However, they're not being displayed in the future agenda item section. So my general thought here is we either try to, add the items that we agree that we're going to add, or move this as is, but so long as we discuss in the future agenda item section of this meeting that we talk about all the items that are not in the future agenda item section, so that we continue to accurately capture all of the future agenda items that we have agreed to.
I might agree with you, Mr. Vargas. I am looking at that as I think a couple of them are going to be coming off pretty soon. I know one, for example, the formal training on the Brown Act. As the board, we will be getting that on. So I think we could possibly pull that based on some action being taken, because we've already taken a poll on when we're going to be available. So I think we will probably want to discuss these future agenda items when we get to them tonight. And then from there, we can make a decision on how we're going to address and how we're going to add, how we're going to subtract the list, if that's okay with you.
That sounds great. I have no other comments on this.
Okay. Anybody else? If there are no other comments, can we go to a motion?
I'll move.
I will second that one as well. So we got item 7.1. Roll call, please.
Member Solis?
Yes.
Member Collins?
Yes.
Member Inch?
Yes.
Member Langner?
Yes.
Member Vargas?
Yes.
President Merriam?
Yes, and motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we're going to go on to discussion items. Starting off with 8.1, it's the naming of facility. And I think this had to come up with the city schools meeting. Dr. Ubu, can you elaborate on this or give us a little bit more explanation to this?
Yes, there was some momentum about 2 years ago on the school board to consider creating a committee for the potential renaming of the school gym. This came up in conversation at the last city schools meeting, and I believe it was my understanding from the meeting that the board wanted us to come back with our policies in front of you, with the idea being, is there a majority of the board that wants to proceed on this? And if so, does the board want to follow the administrative regulation that has us create a committee? Would there be a board member who wants to lead that committee or not? Or does the board want to not potentially vote to not follow this and move forward on the naming of the gym? At least that was the part of the conversation that was proposed. So I thought the best thing to do was to put our board policy and the administrative regulation in front of you, and let you have some conversation, to determine if there is an action on the part of a majority of the board members to move forward on naming the school gym or any other part of the facility.
All right, after reviewing what we talked about last week, just as far as format of our meetings, I'm going to open up to public comment at this time. Seeing none, we'll move on to clarifying questions to Dr. Rubio pertaining to this, and then after that we will have discussion amongst the board. I do have a question, kind of a clarifying question as far as how we're approaching this this process. I know the gym is an important piece, along with another part of the the remaining part of the campus. Is that I want to maybe look at it as a more unifying, or more, I'm going to say, taking advantage of what we have, rather than trying to do this pick here, pick there, as far as naming buildings or naming courts or naming playfields. Maybe it's something that we should probably consider, Dr. Rubio, as far as this process, and just clarifying this issue. I think it's still, rather than lurching and naming one building and not having a plan to do what's our policy, and this goes back to the process of what's spelled out in the board policy. So to change the board policy that's what I'm thinking of as far as the approach. To be a more encompassing, have a more inclusive, more encompassing part of the basically taking in the entire campus and looking at how we can best provide naming rights.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I have similar thoughts. I appreciated Councilmember Patz's suggestion about naming the gym. I just want to make sure that we're being reflective of, I guess, who this community cares about, and who's important to this community, meaning the school, the students, the teachers, the parents, the families. So I would like to see if we are going to proceed with naming school buildings or courtyards, then I'd like to see more input and have a more sort of collaborative process.
I will add for the board's information that we did have a city staff member come up to us in the last couple of days and say there's one concern that they thought about, which was, if, and we don't know this will happen, but if a company came in and said, hey, we would be willing to sponsor this site and this facility, our current policy, and I think this is based on education code, is that once we name a building, I notice here in our administrative regulation that the name shall not be changed for at least 20 years. There was some concern that was expressed about that, just throwing that out there. I don't know if that helps the conversation or not.
Dr. Rubio, on that behalf, or that item, let's say you have a corporate, just for sake of discussion, although it may or may not happen, is let's say Cliff Bar comes in and they want to name the field Cliff Bar Field. They have naming rights for, it's similar like you see corporate naming rights. How does that affect what you've just stated as far as board policy, as far as ed code, with it a 20-year lifespan? Or is this exclusive of that?
I think we would have to check with legal to see if there is ed code behind this or not, and there may be, I don't know offhand, because it would have a profound effect on, if a sponsor says, I'm willing to give this much money for 5 years, but we can't change the name for 20 anyway, it would create a little bit of a problem for us.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. We could find out if there is an ed code behind this.
I don't think this is an isolated incident. I mean, there's a number of fields, a number of things that have been, buildings and places that have been noted as special with a name. So, yeah, I would recommend doing that. I mean, or that would be my recommendation. But so.
Okay.
So I would suggest that we move forward with a committee, particularly for the gym, because this is something that we would like, that we could consider moving forward with. I think the idea of a corporate sponsor, I think, again, a committee would have to evaluate whether that's the values of the community. Like, does this community want to have a Cliff Bar gymnasium? Or, you know, again, I think it goes down to having a committee. And right now, we have some suggestions. So we have a suggestion, and I think it's completely reasonable to move forward with a committee to move that forward.
When it comes to the policy, for clarification, Don, does the committee help drive the policy, or is it still up to the board to decide what changes or how to update the policy?
I'm thinking maybe it's the board policy.
The policy exists. I mean, the policy is already written. The policy says the committee meets. I mean, the policy exists.
Sorry, I asked a slightly different question. I asked a slightly different question that you're addressing. I'm asking if we wanted to change or make updates to this policy. Is it the committee that recommends the changes to the policy, or is it still, does the board drive that process?
It could probably be either, if I may add. If you're talking
Yeah.
about change, if you're talking about potentially change, assuming there's no conflict with education code, if you're asking what the precipitous can be for a change in policy, I think it could come from a community member standing up to a committee, to the board's own desires, if that answers your question.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that it could come either from the committee or from this board.
In terms of a policy change.
Updating policy changes.
I
updates to
think
the
so.
policy.
I think it's
we're
a chicken.
responsible for changing it, but we could take into consideration the recommendations of the
So the
committee.
committee could drive those changes, but it's still up for us to approve, basically.
Right.
Yeah, got it, thank you.
Yes, I think we have the final
So
say.
I
on
like
it.
the,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I like the idea of the committee, for sure, but I don't like the idea of corporate sponsorship when it comes down to a building in this facility itself. I think it should be kept to, giving honor to a community member, past or present.
Okay.
Because then you get political, and then everybody's going to start trying to buy up different pieces of this property.
And I'll just add, so it's a very good point,
The teen
Member
center,
Collins.
the gym.
Sure, just to let everyone know, the City Schools Committee last year, about a year ago, I think, did make a decision jointly that they didn't want to play sliced and diced, I think was the expression. However, they said if there were enough numbers on the check, that they would look at, the City Schools Committee jointly was very open to naming large portions of the facility.
See,
I'm just giving you the background. That was last year.
And I think, as Member Inch said, that'd be something that the committee would have to decide, if that's within the values of this district. So I understand your point, Member Collins.
Yeah, and I think it's two separate things. I think one is corporate sponsorship, and the other is a memorial to someone who's fallen or who's no longer with us. So I think I don't think it'd overlap, unless something were to happen that we'd want to name, let's say, a field where you can actually utilize that for money generating aspect. So.
I truly believe on a corporate level that if it's in the kindness of your heart to help the students and the youth, then your name doesn't need to be on anything. It's all about the heart. That's just what I believe.
And the committee I was suggesting was a naming committee for the gym. It wasn't a policy committee to talk about the policy. I wasn't suggesting a policy committee regarding naming. I was suggesting just the policy committee for the gym.
But I think it goes back to what I was trying to say before, as far as I feel that we want to take a logical and plan this out, rather than saying, this time we're going to name the gym, and then we should think about how we can best utilize and best represent past and present and future generations with this facility. We have Annie Yates. Does anyone know what the history of Annie Yates is?
Yes.
Okay.
She was a teacher at the old site.
Okay. And how long ago was the school named?
100 years ago, there was a site that burned down before they moved it.
We can't hear you.
Okay. What's that?
We can't hear.
I'm sorry.
We can't hear
Oh.
What, either.
Possibly over 100 years ago, there was a second site, or there was a site before the current the old Anna Yates site, and she was a teacher there, and she moved from there to the rebuild site. So, yeah, I do know who she is, and I really don't want to get lost in this. Let's overanalyze it, let's make it more complicated than it is. I would like to head a committee and form a committee to name the gym after Stephen Daines, or any other suggestions that people come up with at this committee. If other people have other names, then fine, but I would like to start moving forward with naming things, and I have an interest in the gym.
Okay. So what I'm elaborating on is from that point on, you just touched upon is that there's a possibility of future or other items to be named. That's what I'm getting at as far as trying to kind of coalesce around an idea, is that this is the opportunity. We have the gym. We have other things that we can look at. I don't want to just say, at this time, we're going to just name the gym and be done with it. I want to have a plan on what we could possibly do.
I mean, it's very hard to get committees together. It's very hard to get people to come and engage in committees, and I'm not sure when you're talking about naming a bunch of things, how complicated that gets and how many people would be involved.
We can also incorporate that in with the students. That could also be something that the students can bring to the table through their English classes, or history. They can look and see who was involved in what in Emeryville and how influential it was. And it can be a visual project, actually, and everybody can come and vote on it. It could be a community thing, and it could be a student thing, and a lot of people can be involved. But I'd like to be on that committee.
So it sounds like the question, if I may add, is that is there a majority on the board that is ready to take action to form a committee at this time, or is it the will of the board that you wait to have larger conversations that Member Merriam is alluding to? That's my understanding of the current conversation.
I believe that we should form a committee, but for Member Merriam's idea with sort of the larger picture, and I think that incorporates Member Collins' idea. I'd like to get the students involved as well in the community.
Right. So maybe this could be discussed at a city schools meeting on an agenda or something, or is it just strictly the school?
Right now, I think the question is, does the school district, which is, I think, sufficient, willing to create a committee? And the question, if it's framed, I think, as Member Langer framed it, is a committee to look at an overall strategy for naming for the facilities. Did I
think it was
capture that?
That's my vision.
I think there are bigger, more pressing items that we should be working on. Really, a lot more than the future agenda items currently suggest. But something positive can come from this. I like, Don, I like your suggestion about a bit more of a holistic approach, and what Bailey seconded in looking not just the gym, but actually increasing the scope and talking about any and all other opportunities that we have. And I think that committee would probably start by reviewing the policy and offering alternatives and ensuring that, Ben, like you mentioned, that it ensures there's student participation and the entire community gets a say on this. So I like that idea, and I'd like to be part of that committee as well.
All right, so it sounds like we have 2 volunteers for that committee from the board, at least. And then if that's the case, as you stated, Dr. Rubio, as far as going forward.
What, 2 volunteers?
Ms. Collins.
Well, she said she was interested.
No, I'm
Three of us.
not participating in that one.
So let me help if I can. There are 2 questions, and board members, you may want to make some individual motions that you can vote on separately. I think Member Inch is expressing and may make a motion that there's a committee formed by the action of the board as a naming committee specifically for the gym. And I think the other question that's been posed is which is different, should there be a committee formed by action of the board in regards to a naming policy for the facility and what that would look like going forward? So those are the 2 questions, I believe.
But we have naming policies. That's why I'm very confused by this, because we have naming policies that you attach our naming policies.
I think it might boil down to is it one facility or many facilities? I think that's kind of the gist of it. That's what I'm looking at as far as motions. Do we want to just have a committee just to name the gym, or do we have a committee just to name basically going beyond the gym and our facility and what opportunities we have?
I'd like to make a motion for forming a committee that would help us determine the names of not just the gym, but all of our facilities and any component that we believe could be named.
I'll second that.
I'd like to hear a little bit of student input on this.
Well, I remember last year we were asked to give input about naming the clinic, but I don't think that actually ever worked out. We, as a student body, we actually came up with a couple of ideas, but I don't think that was ever used as input. So I'm not sure whether or not our ideas would be even considered, or how much they would even be considered.
That's a fair criticism.
Yeah.
If you were not taken into consideration when you were asked of it before. So if we do form this committee, I would hope that that does not happen again.
But it's not too late. It doesn't have a name, does it?
It doesn't have one, does it?
No.
Not
Let's,
sure.
yeah, resurrect it. I
So,
know you'll still be on ASB.
so the motion on the table will help us address
Yeah.
that.
Right.
I'm hoping for a second.
Okay.
So- oh, you second?
Oh.
Great, so we're voting?
Can we be clear on what we're voting for?
Yeah, the motion is to form a committee to have naming, I say not naming rights, but naming policy for the entire facility, giving them the ability to name various parts of the campus.
Okay.
So, again, when you talk about naming a committee to talk about policies, does that mean people would start throwing around names and deciding names? Would it then come to the board on a public hearing and people vote on it? Because that's really clear as to how the naming happens.
Mhm.
If you pick a facility and suggest a name, as opposed to a committee that you're talking about that's going to talk about policies and consistencies.
No, I don't think it's
and-
policies. I think it's a matter of sitting down, and this is the plan we want to pursue based on input from a lot of the people that want to participate. And that has the ability to create, this is what we've come up with, this is the ability, the options that we have to name this campus or this parts of the campus, the gym, the field, the K-8 building, anything along those lines where we have the ability to honor somebody in that nature.
So this committee would not pick those names. This committee would talk about how those people were picked.
First, how to, and then from there, then we can say, this is what we can plan on doing.
And again, we have a policy that talks about how things are named.
And the committee would review the policy and, if appropriate, recommend changes to that policy as part of the actions of the committee, is how I understand it.
But why? I feel like we already have issues even getting people to participate in committees. People participate in committees and they feel like they're not heard. And why create another layer of, let's talk about what we're going to talk about? That's what I'm hearing here.
I don't believe that if we all had a chance to review the policy, I don't believe that the policy in its current state will get us to where we want to go. So to me, the committee's first action would be to review the policy to make sure that we have sufficient, that the vision of the board and the intention of the board is reflected in this policy. So it's very likely that the committee would bring this policy back for review and approval of the board before we move forward. I don't think it's in the current state. I don't think it's ready to go.
It's already a pretty elaborate, people have to meet, you have to get a certain group of people together to talk about what they want to name it after or pick names, and then they come here and you have to schedule a public hearing where it's voted on and where we approve it. I mean, that's already several layers and meetings and quite a bit of effort, actually, to try to get from point A to point B.
Well, I'd just like to say, when and if this committee comes to light, to please, let's make sure it's well-rounded and very diverse. So in that, I'm saying make sure we have at least 2 teachers, 2 community members, 2 students, 2 staff, Just make sure it's input from a group that's inclusive.
That's a great point. As you described it, that's not in the policy, so we'd have to update the policy to reflect that.
Okay.
So that's why I think we should start. In fact, we had a second for the motion, so I'd recommend that we try to vote and see if there's agreement to form a
Okay,
committee.
and the motion was to
What's your motion?
Form a
again?
form a
committee.
committee.
Form a committee to review the sort of naming process for the entire campus.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, it dovetails
And then
with.
go
the-
and then implement that process and select names to bring to the board so that we ultimately are inclusive of what the community would like to name the school and portions of the school.
All right.
And is that a motion?
And Member Vargas made that motion, I've seconded it.
Okay.
So can I have a roll call on that, please?
Member Ball,
Yes.
Member Solis,
Yes.
Member Collins,
Yes.
Member Inch,
No.
Member Langner,
Yes.
Member Vargas,
Yes.
President Merriam.
Yes, motion carries 6-1.
Do we need to decide who, do we need to identify who the committee members are?
I think it's been entered into the public forum as far as wanting to volunteer. You said you did.
Yes.
Wonderful. So we have our 2 board member representatives to the committee, and if you require additional assistance from the board, please don't hesitate to ask.
Okay.
You don't know what you
That
got
was a little
yourself
quicker
into.
than I thought, but it's good. All right.
Done.
That's cool.
All right. All right, and we're going to move on to 8.2. That's the equity policy. That's the second reading for that item.
Yes, good evening. As a member Merriam, President Merriam said, this is the second reading, and I have attached both a clean version and some edits based on previous board input. This was also sent out to teachers again, just so that everyone had the opportunity to look at it again. We're kind of excited, at least in my office at the staff level, that we have the opportunity to have this potentially approved by the board before we enter into our September 5th and 6th training with all employees and Mr. Singleton regarding issues around race and equity. So again, it's broad. Board policy is meant to be broad. There is no admin regulation in terms of implementing this attached yet. However, it's my hope that after the teachers and I have more time in 2 days with Mr. Singleton, if there are other things that come up, whether somebody says, hey, we should have added this to our board policy, or let's come up with an implementation plan as an administrative regulation, those would come back to you. So that's for you for this evening for your consideration. Thank you.
Any public comment on this item? None. We will move to clarifying questions for Dr. Rubio.
Have no questions.
I have no questions either.
Ms. Collins, any questions?
I'm good.
Wait, can we ask something? I was just gonna ask because I saw that it was only addressing like racial and ethnic kind of like disparities, but like, is there any way we can include like LGBTQ youth, like addressing that within this policy, or would that require a different policy?
That's a great question. We do have other board policy, I believe, that addresses those areas that you just referred to. However, if the board pleases or they think it's the right fit, I don't know why we couldn't. But if you have a suggestion for some way that you think this fits in the right place in here, then so be it. That's great.
I'd like to add in, I believe we asked Mr. Singleton, who helped us craft this policy, I believe Member Inch had asked him about including gender, and it was his recommendation that we keep this just limited to race. But you know, if we wanted to develop other policies, and I think from my perspective, what he was saying is we didn't want to sort of, I agree that, you know, these different communities definitely need support and attention, but just so as not to sort of cloud this particular policy. That was my understanding.
And to further those comments, I think the board and I would be very pleased, certainly I would be, if as a student member or any students who would like to propose, because we may not have any policy in the way you're thinking of it addressing any specific issues regarding other groups of students. And so, feel free to check in with Ms. Tamery, who holds, and you could check on. We could show you how to check online as well. But it's very possible we don't have board policy in the area you're thinking of, or in the way you're thinking of it. And it could be a great thing to come from our student members that say, hey, why don't we have policy that addresses inclusion or how people are recognized or treated or celebrations? And so please don't hesitate to check in with Ms. Tamery if you want on figuring out how to look at our board policies, and we can check if you have a specific question if it exists or not, and if it doesn't exist, I think it would be great to say, hey, board, what about this?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Since this is a motion, any deliberations amongst us here on the DS?
This is great. I'd like to move.
I would just like to thank the board members for putting in the time and effort to put this together, and Dr. Rubio as well. And I think this is a great board policy, and as we've discussed before, this is just a policy, and we need to put in the work to implement these things as well.
And I just want to add my 2 cents. This is, as a board, we are faced with policy decisions, and this policy that we're discussing tonight is probably, if not the most important one of this time. We see the strife and the environment out there, and with this in mind, I think this is one of the most important decisions that we have to make, and I cannot support this enough that we are proceeding with this, and I full support behind this decision. And I do want to thank Dr. Rubio for introducing me to Mr. Singleton. He's been an eye-opener for myself.
All right.
Do I have
I will make a motion to.
Do I have a motion for accepting this, for approval for this board policy?
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Member Ball?
Yes.
Member Solis?
Yes.
Member Collins?
Yes.
Member Inch?
Yes.
Member Langner?
Yes.
Member Vargas?
Yes.
President Merriam?
Yes. Okay.
So President Merriam, can I just go back to 8.1 and a little clarity on my remark that I made with our community collaborations and the different folks, and I just want to make sure, and I work with a lot of them, and I just want to make sure that it was just what I was feeling that I was saying, and that it's not to be offensive to anyone that might take it offensive. When I was saying about the check and from the heart, and not necessarily about the name. So I just wanted to be clear with that.
You weren't intending to offend any potential corporate sponsors, is that what you're saying?
Correct. and I want them to keep on loving our kids, and they do a good job at it, but that was just a statement that I
So there is a
was
number.
saying from the heart.
No, I think your point had merit to it, and I understand your position, and I'm wary of bringing corporate interests into the school, depending on what they're trying to get out of it. So
Thank
I
you for that
understand that.
support, Member Langer.
All right. We had a motion, right, on that, and we voted on it, and the vote was unanimous. Oh, no, 6-1.
It was unanimous. Oh, are you talking about 8.1?
Oh, no, 8.2.
8.2 is unanimous.
Unanimous. It was unanimous, I
Okay,
believe.
sorry. Thank you. All right, calendar review, and it's next regular board meeting is September 13th at 5:30 p.m. And guess what? There's no school for students. The district-wide professional development, September 5th and 6th, and the 25th and October 9th. You're gonna be happy about that, don't you? No school.
No school. And then also to confirm, we have the Brown Act training on September 23rd, 9
Yes.
a.m.
We just confirmed today.
Wonderful.
We can move on to item 9.1, which is future agenda items, which I think we kind of touched upon earlier. Now we can focus our attention on those items. From that, we have number 1 is facilities plan. Number 2, formal training of the Brown Act, which, as Ms. Langler just said, we have formal training on the 23rd of September, and then an update of daily average attendance, which I think will be coming from Dr. Rubio within the next 2 weeks, possibly, and then possibly dovetailing that with the funding aspect of it, and then how to promote more communication between students and the board. Thank you for that bit of information and recommendation to do that. And then number 5 is the request for information regarding 2010-2011 technology hardware inventory and monitoring. And that may dovetail with the audit that is possibly in our future. And then number 6 is ECCL update, and the final one is the COC update.
And that COC update is also scheduled for the second meeting in September.
All right. So it looks like things are on the horizon to knock some of these names off the list. Okay.
We should probably just, I suspect Cruz may have
Yes,
some future agenda
exactly.
items, so we should probably pause here and.
I also have a future agenda item.
Okay. Can we take a brief recess for?
Do you want to, should we hear member inches first?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, test scores, I believe you guys have received them.
Okay.
I would like to know when they're going to be public. I don't know how they become public, but I'm assuming that they'd be on the CAS website. Do you have a date for that?
You're asking me a question right now?
I guess maybe I could solve this from a future agenda
Yeah,
item,
no,
if you could answer that now.
I don't unfortunately know, but I can find out, and I can send that information to you and the board, and you'd like them to come back to another meeting?
I just want to answer that one question.
When did it come public?
If it could go to everybody, that would be
Sure.
fine.
Okay.
But I want to know exactly when they're coming out.
You got it. I'll get that information, and I'll ask Ms. Tamery to send that information out to the full board.
Thank you.
Sure.
Member Vargas, we
Yes.
held this.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you for your patience. So,
We were having an ethical moment, I will share with you, but we
Awesome.
decided to wait for you.
awesome. So there are 6 agenda items that we discussed in the past that are no longer, that didn't make it into the future agenda item section. And I would, from my previous comment, I think we
Mhm.
should keep them. Even if that
Mhm.
list continues to grow, we should still make sure that they are present in the agenda minutes for that.
Why don't you go ahead and
Go through those?
broadcast them?
Right. The first one is to review our sexual harassment policy. We spoke about this on June 28th. We said we're going to bring that back and evaluate to see whether it requires any updating or not. The second item on from 628 was desired to revisit or implement a policy on restorative justice. Yep. So that we had discussed in the past.
I would, can I interrupt you, Member Vargas?
Please.
I would love to hear, I believe our new principals have some programming that it relates to restorative justice, so in relation to that, I would love to know what we currently do in that field.
It's even better.
Dr. Rubio, could you have the principals provide that in our update?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Then we also, on the last meeting on August 3rd, we spoke about a presentation around the space utilization and how the open areas overlap between some grades versus the others. Hopefully, we spoke about not necessarily requiring anything fancy, but just so that there's a plan that can be effectively and efficiently communicated to the community.
Yeah, that wasn't, I remember that.
Yep.
Mhm.
Then the next one was about science adventures for girls and having a recommendation for how and if to expand these programs, and then also in looking for programs that were not just for girls but also for like the equivalent for boys. Then we also spoke about sharing the parent outreach plan, how we as a school communicate with parents, in what frequency, which mediums, what alternative mediums there are for folks that are, to bring this comments earlier, that may not have access to technology, just to talk about that, how we reach out and help ensure that we increase the engagement of our community. And then the other item that passed on was updates. We said that every other meeting we would talk about construction item updates. So I just wanted to make sure to bring that back up again. It may be part of a future agenda item that's already there, but it wasn't clear to me, so that's why I thought I'd bring it up. And then
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry, that's the warranty items.
that may be.
I think so. Yes,
Yeah.
I believe it is.
Okay.
The status of warranty items.
Great. Uh-huh.
And to dovetail with that, Dr. Rubio, pertaining to, I talked to some of the staff talking about just some of the things that have come up since they've occupied the building. The warranties were running out by the December 5th, I think it is, and the fact that they should report to you to itemize the other concerns or issues so we can get that to the receiving party as soon as possible.
Are you, and that's what we've been doing, but are you suggesting something different?
No, I'm suggesting the same thing, just make sure it's enforced and time is of the essence, so
Mhm.
it's very critical.
So we can re-communicate
Yeah.
that to everyone?
Yeah,
We'll
just
rebroadcast
rebroadcast it so that they just, hey, please report as fast as possible.
Then I'd like to suggest a couple of items, if there's appetite from the rest of the board.
No, I had dinner.
Was that your dinner already? Okay. You're full, I'm sure.
No,
Just
go ahead.
space.
Sorry.
The first one that we just discussed was to work on a policy for equity around gender and gender identity. So to get our work started on that, if there is somebody else on the board that wants to.
Yeah, I support that.
Great. The next one comes from some thoughts or some questions from the last meeting that have to do with our counseling services and resources. I think there were general questions around that. There was a general sentiment that we potentially may not have enough counseling resources available for, especially for high school kids. So I wanted to bring that topic up to see what we're currently doing, and if there are areas of opportunity to provide a recommendation for what we should do to ensure that anybody in the high school that's looking for higher education counseling or equivalent will have access to them.
Oh, I'm sorry, and to make sure I clarify, you're referring to counseling regarding college? You said higher education?
Yes,
Okay.
or
I thought you meant mental health when you were starting. No. You're referring to
higher education
Thank
or
you.
other academic counseling. Yeah,
Got it,
academic
thank you.
counseling.
So,
Does anybody else have interest for us, and is it just me?
I definitely have interest in that.
can I just ask the board just to help a little bit? Let me just back up. Well, let's do this one. So are there at least 3 members of the board, just so we're following our policy?
Yeah.
That
So
want
it's- I thought it
the
was
presentation on
Yeah.
academic counseling services and what we offer.
Mhm.
I just want us to, I appreciate both members so far saying yes. but
Yeah, I would third that measure.
Okay.
And then also
Fourth
too,
it.
I think we would maybe drop back and maybe we do take an assessment of what we have for our list. I know it's a growing list, and we can bring these things back
Mhm.
if we wanted to. Because I know I offered up the facilities plan. We can drop that for right now. You can take that
Okay.
off,
Okay.
and then from there, because I can come back at a later time and introduce that because
Mhm.
I'll probably have the items ready at that time.
Sure.
So. Um,
Got it.
so out of what we have listed here, I know some of them are going to be gone within the next 2 board meetings, but keep them on there anyway. So adding Mr. Vargas's comment or items as well, and then Ms. Langner a second, and then Ms. Inch, her regarding the gender training as well.
There was, okay, so the
Not training.
policy on
Policy.
gender
Gender
and gender
policy.
identity.
I
Yes?
actually had a couple more.
Okay.
There was actually a couple things that I had asked for, AIM High, the AIM High program.
Mhm.
And then when I talked to teachers after the first day of school, drop off and pick up has been very rough. And that one I would hope to start looking at sooner rather than later.
I just so you know, we're happy to bring that, if the board would like that to come as an item for a report. We can make it part of the principal report, but it is something the principal is actively working on and spoke to the staff about in terms of the K-8. So, but yes, if you have the
So a solution or an improvement to drop off and pick up?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Would the majority of the board like aim high? We may have asked this last time, so I apologize, I don't recall. And the drop off and pick up, I guess it would be how that's going and procedures to both.
No, I'm more interested in improving it and improving the communication about what the expectations are for drop off and pick up for parents.
So would that include would you be satisfied with a report from the principals as to what their plan is or how they've improved it? Is that what you're looking for, so I understand?
It needs to be improved. They haven't improved it, but yeah, if they have ideas about how to improve it, it would be a start of a conversation, because parents were being ticketed on Tuesday.
Yes, there are. The Emeryville Police Department, unfortunately, a number of parents double parked. One gentleman put his car in the middle of the road, left the car as he went to look for his child, and he was almost cited for not having a driver's license. But there was a number of things that were happening. But we did have support. I'm happy. At least we had support from Emeryville Police Department. But I think I got the gist of what you're.
I don't think there's a lot of communication about what they're supposed to do or how to make it run smoothly. I haven't seen anything on the district website. I haven't seen anything sent out to parents as to, particularly kinder parents that want to park and walk their children in. I don't know what the rules are. I haven't seen anything written down about what would help. So if the principals are working on that and would keep us in the loop and give us a step-by-step as to what they're suggesting.
Got it.
Sorry, so the ask is for recommendations on how to improve pickup and drop off?
Start the conversation about, recommendations. They might not have any yet, but we can talk about it.
Sorry, I thought, so how is that an agenda item? Sorry.
I don't understand if it's going to be an agenda, because we're going to sit here and talk about it. Which information we're going to have to be able to talk about? Is anecdotal evidence? I don't know. I'm just trying to get my head around as far as how we provide our.
So I don't want to tell them what they need to say, but if they could say either they have ideas or they don't have ideas, or what they're suggesting or what they're thinking about as to what would improve it. I myself think that communication about what they're supposed to do, what parents are supposed to do, is already lacking. Maybe the principals know that, but maybe their principals don't know that. So they are just starting here. They've had their first couple days. They've seen drop and pick up for the first time, except for Miss Good, and now they can possibly, and I don't know if they've even seen it, but if they could look at it, it needs to be addressed.
You're asking for a presentation if the majority of the board is willing to have a presentation at a future board meeting on this topic.
Yes.
I'd like to offer a slight variation to that, that it's not a presentation, but it's rather a presentation on how, that includes recommendations on how to improve pickup and drop off, and those recommendations would include how would address outreach and improve outreach. So that in that shape seems like a bit more actionable and something that I think we may all benefit. So I'd recommend we make that a future agenda item, if other board members agree.
Well, I think the time is pretty of the essence on this issue, because school has just started, and I think by the time it goes down a month, 2 months down the road, and things aren't going to work themselves out, but people will deal with it in a sense. But I'd rather say it's more critical that we address this in some fashion, either be it through principal acknowledgement of the issue and getting ideas how to solve it, or at least mitigate the issues. Something that
that's even better. So I think what we're saying is that it shouldn't be a future agenda item, but rather we are directing the superintendent to help us ensure that we implement improvements to pick up and drop off.
that's what I'm looking at.
I'm okay with doing both. I mean, it's up to you. And Mr. Wall, I wasn't in the staff meeting today, but I think Ms. Carter may have brought this issue up in terms of bringing kids outside or, no, okay, I'm incorrect, okay.
Yeah.
I think we should just direct, I mean, I think the principals need to fix the problem in the immediate. I would like to know what they ultimately end up doing. I mean, if it's not a problem anymore, then I don't really see the need for me to get involved or us to get involved either. But so I support the idea to direct Dr. Rubio to support the principals in figuring out a solution to the problem.
Sounds great. I support that too.
I do too.
So there's, just to be clear, then there's not a majority of the board who wants that to come into, as a presentation then. But I will move to support the principals immediately on that. Yes?
And
And
I
then
would
it-
like to hear a report in on it, at
Yeah.
least part of their principal's
The
report.
principals report.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
If you could ask them to include whatever the solution ends up being.
Sure.
Right.
Then if we could go back to the aim high item, what are we looking to accomplish there?
Dr. Rubio sent out an email quite a while ago saying he had met with them. They are a summer, I think even after-school program that's growing, that he had talked about working with and possibly having them present. It's been floating around for quite a while, and it has yet to come.
I didn't recall I was going to have them present, but you are correct in terms of we have had 2 preliminary conversations with them and with one potential funder because there's some money involved to support the program. And you may be right. I may not have my memory correct on this, so it would be great to have them come for a presentation. So my apologies if I'm recalling that incorrectly, and I certainly can reach out because I think it would be wonderful to have them present to the board. So I'm happy to work on that.
Great. I support that as well, the presentation.
And sorry, the future agenda item is to present the details of the aim high program.
Yes, to inform the board of Aim High and what it does and how it's funded and what it does for students, grade level span program. Because I don't think that we're all well informed. I'm not as well informed as I would like to be as well regarding what they offer.
Great. Then I'd like to suggest a different take on that. I think we could all become informed of this. It doesn't have to be necessarily be a public session. We can just distribute that information, and we could become smarter on that on that topic that way. However, what could be a good future agenda item is to maybe present a recommendation for if we want to implement this program, to provide a recommendation on that.
I'd like to hear directly from Aim High before, as part of the information gathering process before we come up with any sort of recommendation myself.
Yeah, because the presentation would be specialized to our school, our students, and give us a feeling as to what they could do for us. The website would probably be telling you what they've done for other students, and by all means, go find out about it. They have a very good track record, but if they presented it to us, it would be customized to talk to us about what they could do with us, for us, as opposed to what they've done for other people.
That's all great things. What I'm suggesting is that that material is shared with us ahead of time, and that we all review that material ahead of time, and that rather than us all together sit through either half an hour or an hour presentation, but we actually come in with questions and make that time much more productive. That's what I'm recommending that we do.
My compromise on this would be that they still give us a presentation, but we get that presentation or resources in advance so that we are better informed. They could potentially tailor their presentation to us with the idea that we've already reviewed certain materials that they've presented to us in advance. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, and I don't, yeah.
That's a little bit much.
I'm envisioning just sort of the normal process where they
Right,
give us.
I mean, a 10, 15 minute, 20 minute, no more than 30-minute presentation, and to the public and the students and staff can also see what they have to offer in a presentation. I think keeping it as a part of an agenda item would be enough, sufficient, I think.
That's fine with me.
Okay, so do we have a consensus as far as aim high presentation?
I'm a little confused, so
I
what do we?
think we're
just
going
tell me.
back to just the standard. We would like a presentation from Aim High about what they can do for us
Got it.
in
Okay,
particular.
thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry, I got lost there.
At least
Not
agree
a
that that
lengthy one.
content is going to be
Short
distributed to us ahead of time.
Prior to the
Yes, and it
meeting?
will be custom and tailored to our needs.
Yes, if Dr. Rubio,
We can have them give us the presentation in advance, like most, it's normally agendized and includes supporting materials.
Got it.
all right. Okay, any other future agenda items?
So I had a future agenda item, but I thought it could also just be a part of your report in next time
Sure.
in regards to, we have the request for information regarding 2010 technology, 2011. So if you can give us the update on 17-18 school year.
On
And-
technology and what we're doing?
Yeah, and is there a process in place when the computers are put in the students' hands?
Mhm.
What's the expectations and what is it that what's the boundaries for the teachers in their planning when it comes to the technology?
When you say boundaries, what do you mean?
How well is it incorporated in the lessons that they learn and to what extent?
Okay, I'm following you, and I think since we have a new person supporting our teachers in this from an instructional
Right.
perspective, so I'll have her come and present that
Okay.
information. Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Two more items. The first one, that it's maybe a bit more of an item for the city school board committee, but in the past we've spoken about the importance of, I believe it's called an SRO, resource of security, blanking something officer. It's basically presence here in campus. I've been hearing a lot from teachers and parents that it's something that they are very much looking to see, especially around today's climate. There is, and in speaking actually to officers here in the city, that where they've implemented programs where, and even my daughter remembers, officers coming in and reading to the children in kindergarten, first grade, and then just making officers part of the community instead of something that's necessarily scary, but actually making them part, making feel that they belong. So I'd like for us to, if we need to discuss it among the board first, then that's why I'm recommending that we potentially add it as a future agenda item. If that's the case, I do understand that the ultimate financial decision comes from the city. So ultimately, if we decide to move forward, we should bring it to the city schools committee, but I want to bring that topic back.
So you're suggesting that this becomes a topic or for the city schools meeting? After we have a consensus from the board?
Right.
Kind of like what they did to us regarding,
What they did what? What they do?
oh, no.
Well,
We can discuss it. I think we should discuss it in advance of the city schools meeting so that we come to a consensus as a board, and then we can present that to the city schools committee. That sounds good to me.
great. So
So
then there's
consensus
a
would be
request
that-
for
So it's more on the board getting together for.
discussion.
All right.
Awesome. And then the last one was if there is, I noticed that the Pledge of Allegiance is no longer part of the ceremony.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask
What happened?
whether there's more appetite from the rest of the board to have a discussion about that, about whether we keep it or not.
I want to know whose decision it was to remove it without
It was accidental.
conversation.
Well, I'll share with you, and I'll let the board president chime in. We realize that it is not, there's no requirement in our current bylaws that it exists, and so if the school board so desires that it exists, then I think you guys can decide to, I'm just saying a lot of no's, a lot of shaking of heads down there. The school board can have that conversation. I would not recommend the conversation, but it's up to the board, because I'm afraid it's going to become a very long, protracted Very, very good debate, debatable topic that I think is great for the debate team at a debate conference. But I think the board has a lot of pressing issues around student achievement this year and other things, and so it would not be my recommendation, but it's certainly up to the board if you want it to be a future long conversation.
I appreciate the input. My general thought is it doesn't have to be a lengthy discussion. We just have to say, are we okay with, do we want to keep it or not? And that's it. My general, and the reason why I bring this up
Yeah.
is because just because something is not required, it's, to me, it's kind of not just okay to just take it out just because it's not required
Yeah.
without having the discussion. And the reason why I bring this up is because I would like for us to have these discussions, regardless of the outcome. They don't have to be, extensive. We just, I'm hoping that as a board, we make these decisions collectively. And that's the reason why I bring this here.
Okay.
So I guess the question is, well, I'm not sure how to do this.
Are there 3 members that want to bring this for discussion?
Yeah.
I'm personally sort of somewhat indifferent, but
Well, let me just chime in for a second. I totally believe that if everyone continues to remove the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag, and us as Americans, and in its time, we're losing what should be embedded in us, and it will really dissolve. Instead of standing strong and trying to hold true to the allegiance and hoping that it would bring and restore a sense of community, and the words that we say are embedded in all of our hearts, it might bring us back to where we were without having conversations of removing everything, especially when it comes to God. So if you choose not to say the words, you choose not to say it, but by removing it, those of us that choose to say it, we are not given the opportunity.
It sounds like we're having a discussion right now.
so
Yeah.
why don't we just, I think Member Collins, you vote to have a discussion, it sounds like.
I think I just had my discussion.
Okay. Let's repeat that when we get into that discussion.
So
do we
are
have-
there 3 or more members who want to make a decision to have a discussion regarding whether or not the board wants in the bylaws that the Pledge of Allegiance exists in all meetings?
I would like to have that discussion as well.
I was second.
Is there a 3rd member?
I will be the 3rd member to have this discussion.
Oh, you just did some.
I tried.
All right.
I mean,
That's a future agenda item.
But not too far in the future.
And,
Like maybe the next agenda.
Will this qualify for one of your not too long ones too? Can we keep it short?
It doesn't have to be long, but I think we just need to stand strong, and we need to keep our allegiance to the United States of America, because we are Americans.
I appreciate your opinion very much.
Oh, I'm going to love this discussion.
All right. Any
It's
others?
Maybe what if we offer a much more concise action item, but rather just vote on it? And
Vote to have the discussion.
Well, I think anytime you have a vote, you have deliberation, so I don't think it's left up to that one way of doing it. I think we still have to go through the process of hearing all sides.
all right, so
Can we
we'll have a
limit the, I'm not sure if we can do this, and maybe this will come up in our Brown Act training, but can we limit discussion items to a certain time frame
So that they don't get lengthy.
so that we're not sitting here for an hour and a half?
I think it is within your purview as a
Mhm.
board, even with members of the public here, that if
Yeah.
you, for time and I think they call it for management and efficiency, you
Exactly.
may set a time limit now, or actually maybe more appropriately at the time of the item
The
comes
agenda.
through.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be based on the number of items we have on our agenda, and then we can, at the beginning of the meeting, we'll probably wind up stating that due to the length of this
I would
agenda.
request that you do that,
Okay.
Regardless, that we have a time limit.
regardless of how much
Okay.
time or what
Yeah.
else is on the agenda. I think this should be, if people want to have their say, fine, but we should limit it to, I don't know, a certain amount of time.
I agree. All right.
10 minutes.
That's okay.
I'm good with 3.
Okay.
Ma'am.
Are we finished with the future agenda items?
I have no more future agenda items.
He stopped at 27
Okay.
today.
Okay, we can move on to board announcements if that's the case. Any board announcements?
I was able to meet with several groups of parents on the first day of school. I met with a group of high school parents that also had children that went to NA8s. Also met with NA8s parents. And there was a lot of concern over drop-off and pickup. There was also concern over what parents do when they have a student in both NA8s and the high school, where they drop off because I guess people with siblings, I don't know if the older children are allowed to walk through NA8s, but so that was some issues that came up. There was also a lot of enthusiasm for wanting to find volunteer work. There wasn't a lot of organization, so they weren't sure how they could participate, but a lot of parents definitely wanted to participate and help out at the school and be a part of the community. And just, they weren't sure how. So I think that volunteering and any help that the district can do to help them participate both in the classroom or with things that need organization to help gather participants.
So I was also present on the morning of the first day of school. I think the teachers did an amazing job in getting their kids settled. Many classes, when I went past, was already sitting, including Mr. Wah. He seemed like he already had his kids for about 2-3 years, and they seemed very well acclimated and very comfortable. And it was only about 10-15 minutes into the morning. I did see the PTO table out there meeting and greeting parents for Annie Yates, and I thought that was a good thing, and would hope to see it on the high school side maybe next year. Principal Good, she had it on lockdown. It was very calm, and all the years I worked in Emery, I think it might have been the calmest first day for on a high school level. The Annie Yates, of course, was a little bit busier, but I think the teachers were happy and that they feel like it's going to be a good year. We all know that as the board members and us supporting them and listening to them, we are the ones who's going to lead us into a good, strong school year, and I think we're doing pretty good so far.
Other? No? Okay, if that's the case, we'll move on to, well, actually, there's a change in the agenda at this time. We are no longer needed to have a closed session. It's item 11. So we'll skip over 11 and 12, and then we'll report out from actually 13. So we're going to adjourn.
Good night, everybody.